Hi everyone, I'm Ari. I'm an Unreal Engine evangelist at Epic Games, and this is Crashing with Style in Unreal Engine, where I show you how to get the most out of your crashes. I'm using the Unreal Learning Kit Games example project for this presentation. Now, it's quite hard to crash with Blueprint only, so the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to add a C++ class. And let's make it an actor class. I'm gonna make it an actor that just spawns a reward when you touch it. Once it's done, it will open up Visual Studio like this. I've sped up some parts of this video so you don't have to wait for it compiling. And okay, so we have the header file here and the CPP file here. So let's start by adding a property of a subclass that we want to spawn. And also let's expose it to blueprints. And then let's make a function. Let's call it spawn reward actor. And let's expose that one also to blueprints. And now I'm just gonna implement this. So let's spawn the actor and give it the class that we made in the header. And next, we want to do something with this actor. This is how we're going to make the thing crash. It doesn't need to make sense. Let's just say we're going to give it the same transform as the parent actor. You should probably already do that by default, but you know, just for this example. There we go. Now I'm just going to close the editor and recompile from Visual Studio. Okay, now the editor launched into our startup map, and here's the player start. And I'm just going to make a cube right in front of the player so that when the player touches that cube, it will spawn a reward. I'm going to create a new blueprint that extends reward spawner, has a cube component that overlaps with pawn only, and calls spawn reward actor when it overlaps. And then we can put this in front of the player. Now let's see what happens if we just start playing this. We get into the game, hello. And we're going to now go and touch this cube that is going to spawn our reward. Oh, but something happened. This is a crash in progress. It hasn't crashed yet, but it has caught the exception. And we can see in our code what's going on. But as you noticed in the call stack of the editor itself, we don't have the function names. That's because our symbols are missing. So I'm going to stop this. And I am going to launch the Epic Games Launcher. And I'm going to add the symbols to the editor. So we're going to go here to Options. And I'm going to click Editor Symbols for Debugging. And add that. And now we can try again. Let's press play. And get it to crash again. Now what you can see happens is that we'll go even deeper. And we have the full stack now of the entire call stack. And you can double click any of these to see the corresponding engine code. So it's going through some blueprint function. It's going into reward spawner, and it's crashing inside of set actor transform, because apparently this is a null pointer. So basically what happened is that reward actor class to spawn is null, and as such it returned a null actor. We can actually also see it here in the logs. Spawn actor failed because no class was specified. And then you call a function on a null object and it crashed because it doesn't have permission to access memory around 0. And this is actually probably one of the more common ways to crash in your own code, just dereferencing something where the memory is just null. And when I downloaded the symbols, if you are compiling the editor from source yourself, you don't need to do this. It will compile the symbols locally and you'll have them available. Okay, cool. So this is by far the #1 way to crash in Unreal Engine. You have, as you can see, like you have all the variables, what's happening, and you can browse them and see all the other properties. So much data. But of course, this is only going to be the crashes for people that are actually starting the game and the editor from Visual Studio. And you and I both know that's not going to be everyone, how we're going to get our crashes. It's usually going to be from other members of the team that are not going to be running it from Visual Studio, or it's going to be from the users, the end users, that are just launching the game from Epic Games Store or Steam or on console or whatever. So I'm going to stop this And I'm gonna make it crash without being connected to Visual Studio. So I'm gonna open the project just by double clicking on the new project file. And then we're gonna see what happens if it crashes without having Visual Studio attached. So I'm gonna click play and go and crash. So no Visual Studio instance opened up this time, but instead we get the Unreal Engine 4 Crash Reporter. And here we have the stack. This allows you to send the crash report to us, Epic Games. And of course, in this case, it crashed in our own code. So we should usually not say like, I was playing and it crashed. We should usually not send something like this to Epic Games because it has nothing to do with Epic Games. This is the game's fault. So in this case, we should just close without sending. So what happens when Unreal Engine crashes? The first thing that happens is that the crash handler within the engine, this is both editor and in package games, it will catch it and it will create a directory in /saved/crashes. And this is in relation to where the project itself is, or the game executable. And it will create the mini dump and the crash context runtime XML for additional info, and lastly the log for the session. And we can actually check these out right now, because here we have the project. So here's the saved folder, and if we go into that and into crashes, then we have here one crash, and that's the crash that happened when we did not have Visual Studio attached, because if you have Visual Studio attached, it will not do this. It will assume you handled it. And inside this folder, we can also, well, this crash report client ini, you can ignore that. So here's the mini dump, and a mini dump is a file that you can open in Visual Studio to see the stack. It also has the crash context runtime XML, and if we open that one, this one has a lot of info that happened when the game crashed. So here you can see like what's the error message, and here you can see the source context. You don't always get this, usually just for editor builds, but this is kind of cool. You can see exactly like where it happened. You also have a user activity hint. This is the editor will set this itself, but for game projects you can override it, but just by calling a single function. You have some miscellaneous information about the user's operating system. You'll have memory stats, and this is usually what we want to see. That is the call stack over here, and this will show us just exactly what went wrong. And as you can see, it's symbolicated. A little bit more on that later. Lastly, we have more details about the GPU, for example, the driver details, which is usually quite useful if you are having a GPU crash. You can just tell the user, like, please update your driver, or like helps you figure out if a certain driver is broken. And then for the editor, we have enabled plugins. And for the log, that's actually only for non-shipping package games. So if you are making a shipping package game, it will not log at all. And that's usually because the user doesn't have anything to do with the logs. But you can override that. So if you want the logs to be included, then you can open your game's target.cs file, and you can put the boolean use logging and shipping equals true. And often you want to check the log. So for example, if we go into the game, into the crash, and we open the log, you can see usually quite close to the end, some hint to what happened. And here we actually do have like a really strong hint. We get a warning, spawn actor failed because no class was specified. So I would recommend to always open the log file, check the last few lines in it, and see if it has any kind of hint as to why it's crashing. Then what happens is that after it is creating this crash folder, then it will run the crash report client. But it will, of course, only run the crash report client if the crash report client has been included with the game. And that's when it symbolicates the mini dump and puts the symbolicated call stack into the crash context file. And this only happens if symbols are available. Usually for development builds, you would include the symbols, all internal playtesting, everything like that. But for shipping builds, usually you don't want to ship the symbols file, but you still want to keep it yourself. And lastly, it will show up and offer the user like, hey, do you want to send the crash or not? Now, if we package a development build of the game, run it and crash it, we'll just get a pop-up that says fatal error and no crash reporter. It will still create the crash folder, but the crash context file will not have a symbolicated call stack since the crash reporter didn't fill it. This is because the crash reporter isn't included by default. We can turn it on in the project settings by turning on include crash reporter. That will launch the crash reporter, but it still won't be able to symbolicate the call stack because we aren't shipping the symbols with the game. To include them, turn on Include Debug Files in your project settings and make one more build. You should always make sure to have this on in all your projects if you want to get anything out of your crash reports. And here we go. Fully symbolicated. Beautiful. So with development builds, it's usually fine. Like it's usually only to either a very select few people or internally only to ship the symbol files with the game. But if you are, releasing your build to the general users, I would say you should not include this file, but you need to keep it still because otherwise you're not going to have any way to debug any of your crashes. So it's just as important as the executable file itself. And you need to keep these together in your own releases folder somehow. Let's see how that's going to work. So I'm going to go back to this folder and delete it. And I'm going to go to Unreal Engine. And I'm going to package it as a shipping build now. So I'm going to go to build configuration, change it to shipping, package project, Windows, and build it. After building, usually the first thing I recommend you doing after making a shipping build is going into your binaries folder and taking the symbols and moving them. So I'm just going to cut this and let's just put it in the root folder here for now. There's two reasons why I want to do this. First one is it's quite a big file. It's like, this was a very, very, very small game with like one class, but the entire engine's symbols are in there also. So this is over 100 megabytes. So you don't want to ship this to the user. The second reason is that this allows anyone to just reverse engineer your game because it has all the function names and lots of variable names. So there's two reasons why we don't want to ship the PDB. So what we can do is that we can just store it in some folder. I always recommend you store it somewhere. I'll tell you a better way to do it later, but for now, let's just make a version 1 symbols folder and put it in there. Also, you don't want to only store the symbols. I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to fetch the exe file, but just copy it this time. And I'm going to put it in here. So now we have both the executable and the symbols files. And this should be enough for us to be able to debug the mini dumps. So now this is what we would usually be left with when we have a shipping build. So let's run it and get it to crash. So the crash reporter comes up, and of course we don't get the call stack because we ripped the symbols out, so it doesn't have it anymore. So this is what we want. And now we're going to just look at the crash ourselves. So we go back to here, but we notice there's no saved folder. What do we do now? So the reason why we didn't get a save folder is because usually shipping builds, they're going to be in some directory like program files or even on other platforms. It's going to be in some read-only location. So it's never going to touch anything in its own directory. It actually saves it to the app data. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to paste in a user profile with percentage signs on each side that goes to your own user profile, app data, local, Unreal Learning Kit games. And if I just open it like this, you'll see there is our saved folder. And here we can go into the crashes. And here we have the crash that we just got. And here we have the dump and the crash context runtime. But notice that there's no log. That is because logs are turned off in shipping builds. You can turn it on yourself if you create a variable called use logs in shipping equals true in your game's target file, target.cs. But that only works when you have the source for the editor, because it actually modifies the editor's build configuration. So if you're using the launcher like we're doing, we don't have the option of doing it. We're not going to get logs in shipping builds. Usually you don't need logs. Like it's just another way to fill the user's hard drive. But if you are debugging something, you at least have the option. But yes, now we don't have symbolicated call stacks. So what do we do next? Well, that's why we have the mini dump. So the mini dump contains the call stack and the registers at the time of when your game crashed. And we can just open it by double clicking on it. Here you can see a bit of info about the dump, like what modules were loaded, and the dump summary. And to see actually what happened when it crashed, we can click the debug with native only button here. The thing is, since we moved the symbols file out of the folder and somewhere else, we don't get a symbolicated stack trace here. The way it searches for symbols is that it has embedded into the crash the location of the exe file, and it will check the same folder for the symbols. Since we removed them, we're going to have to figure out some other way of doing this. And one way is to just open the folder where we had the symbol files, and then we can just put the crash dump into it. I'm just going to copy it in there. And now when I open the mini dump and debug in, we get the full call stack over here, fully symbolicated. And this is actually one extra thing we get, because you can see we also get the file from our project, which is weird because like we just opened the dump file. How does it know where on our computer the source files are? Also, because we're using a launcher build of Unreal Engine, if we try to see the source code for these functions, it's not going to show us because it is not in the symbols file what the original name of it was called. But we can figure it out ourselves by just finding these functions. If you're making a source build of Unreal Engine Editor, then you'll get the full path and you'll be able to debug it easily. So yes, how does it know where our source files are? That's because in the symbols files, it's embedded the source file info. And well, we're lucky because we're running on the computer that actually built the binaries. But what happens if we rename the folder that has the source code? Because, you know, usually the source code is going to be on some build machine that built this. So I'm going to close the editor. And then I'm going to rename the project file, just add a 1 to it. And now I'm going to open the dump again, because this is more realistic, what you're actually going to see once users start sending you crash dumps and when you have a build machine. So this is, let me see. So now if I try to open it, as you can see, it just says source not available. It will allow you to try to navigate to the file. It will say, well, this is the original location. Where's the new location? And you could put the file in there, but you're going to have to put it for every single file. And I actually have a better solution. So I'm going to just close this, and then I'm going to open Visual Studio again. But I'm going to open the project file. Actually, it moved. So let's go into here and open the solution file. Then I will go where we have the dump, and I'm going to drag it into Visual Studio. Like this. So we already have our project open. So now when I click debug, now we again know where the source files are because they're in our Solution Explorer, which it queries. So here we go, the function, our function in our code, but it still, of course, can't have the Unreal Engine source files. So this works now for when we have a crash dump and we know which executable and which symbol files it came from. We are now able to debug that fully. But we're not always going to have that luxury. So now the question is, what happens when we begin handling, multiple users crashing on multiple versions also? Now it starts getting more complicated. So let's simplify that process. When the crash reporter runs, we have the option of having it send the crash report. By default, it sends it to Epic Games, but we can customize it to send it to ourselves instead. So here's 3 services that support the crash reporter out of the box. First one is Sentry.io, which have their Unreal Engine for crash reporting landing page here. Second one is Boxblad.com, and here you can see the Unreal Engine guide. And third one is Backtrace.io, and they also have an Unreal Engine landing page. I recommend you check out each of these services and see what they offer and what their pricing is, and just find the one that works best for your needs. For this example, I'm going to use Backtrace, so I'm going to sign up here for an account. We're making an Unreal game, so I'm going to click Unreal here in the integration guides. And here they're showing you how to update your configuration file. So we need this data router URL, and I'm going to copy this. Then I'm going to go into my shipping folder of the game, and I'm going to create a configuration file inside of that. We cannot currently set the crash reporter URL, the data router URL, inside of the project settings, because the crash reporter is its own program. So it has its own config, which defaults to Unreal Engine. But the program does know of the engine folder of the parent game. So we are going to override the data URL, data router URL, inside of the engine. So I'm going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to call it config. Inside of config, I'm going to create a new one called Windows. And here I'm going to create a new text file called windowsengine.ini. Now, if we open this, I'm going to start by just typing in crash report client, and then I'm going to paste in my data router URL and save it. Before we start uploading crashes, though, we need to make sure that the symbols are there first, so they can be symbolicated as they arrive. So, which they mention here. So we're just going to click the symbols button here and upload symbols. And here we can add a tag. So because in our example, this was version 1, so we can just create a new tag 1.0. And here we have it. So now if we play the game, have it crash. Oh no, it crashed. Crash reporter will immediately hide itself, and it will send the crash report in the background. Now we can go back to the backtrace site, and I'm going to click this back button here. And here are now all the bugs that we've gotten uploaded. And I can just click this fingerprint, and here we go. Our stack fully symbolicated for us. And if we click debug, we'll see way more info about what just happened. Like here's the full stack trace, registers that we have, and we can even like browse the attributes here. And here's the user description. Oh no, it crashed. Fantastic. What isn't fantastic though is that the crash reporter by default, it has this look that is aimed at users of the Unreal editor. So here we have, for example, thanks for your help in improving Unreal Engine. We don't want that. Like this is for our game. And also, we have a bug submission form that is for Unreal Editor, not our game. And also, I agreed to be contacted by Epic Games. Like we're going to remove that. We don't have the user's email or anything like that. We're going to remove this, include log file, because it's a shipping build. There are no log files. And also, like there's this, like what does the user do with this? This is useless. It does nothing. So we're going to customize this so it looks a little bit nicer, makes the user more likely to actually send the crash report. And Bugsplat actually has a really nice blog post. If you just go to this URL, they have a really nice tutorial for how to customize the crash reporter for your game. But we're going to just dive right in. So we're going to download Unreal Engine and just change it. I recommend you follow this guide for downloading Unreal Engine. I'm not going to show you how to do it now. It's you can follow this documentation. I already have it set up myself, and we're just going to dive right in. So here's my Visual Studio solution for Unreal Engine 4 for the editor. And I don't want to compile the whole Unreal Engine 4 editor. That's going to take forever. I only want the crash report client. So I'm going to open Solution Explorer, and I'm going to find crash report client. I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to set it as the startup project. There we go. Now, if we try to build it and run it, it'll just stop immediately. The reason that happens is like we can open the output and see why does it decide to shut down. It's because there's no error report found. Okay, so we need to feed in an error report. To do that, we're going to start crash report client.exe with these testing parameters. So we're going to do dash base dir, and we're going to put into that a path to Win64. We're going to make that the path of the program in our shipping folder. So it will read the configuration that we have set there. And then we're going to give it the path to the crash folder, which is what it expects as like the first proper argument that doesn't have a dash in front of it. And in our case, we're just going to use it for the crash that we got before. I'm going to paste them up here into this plugin, the Unreal VS plugin command line. So this just allows you to easily put in start parameters. You can override it like with the few previous ones you had. This is very nice for any code development. I recommend you use this plugin. But in case you don't have it, you can also right click on the crash report client, go to properties, go to debugging, and then put the command arguments there instead. So now if we start it, we'll get the crash dialog. Excellent. So I think we should just start customizing it. I'm going to start by opening up crash report client.cpp. This is the Slate application, and this is where most of the code setting up the visuals of the crash reporter lies. Like here we can see the long text that is telling, oh, go to Epic support, to submit a crash. But we are going to change this to something a bit friendlier that applies more to our game. Oops, sorry about this. Please tell us what happened and send it to us so we can fix it. And I'm just going to try it again. And as you can see, it's already looking a bit friendlier. Okay, so next, let's find the dialog. This is the one, crash reports, complete that files. Let's see where we're using this one. Over here. I think I'm just going to delete this whole block here. There we go. So now let's test it. Yes, much better. Next, let's get rid of these checkboxes over here. I can see they're already here, include logs, and here's the I agree. Yeah, we don't need to agree to logs because there are no logs. We don't need to agree to the email because we don't have your email. Okay, let's see what it looks like now. Getting there. I want to customize this Unreal Engine 4 crash report and Unreal Engine processes crashed to be more regarding like what our app is doing. So let's see if we can find that. Here we go. An Unreal process has crashed. Let's just say, let's just delete this whole thing and only have this. And let's say crashing with style has crashed. And let's remove the game name from here because we're making it nicer. Okay, this is looking much better. I still want to change the title, and I do want it to start a bit smaller. So we're going to open another file for that, and that is crash report client app. Here we go. Here's the size. So I'm going to start by going, let's try 250. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's good. And let's change the title also, Unreal Engine 4 Crash Reporter. Here it is. Crashing with style crash reporter. Let's try once more. Okay, this is way more friendly to users. You just like write, so, I was doing something, and there's no, it's not. They know that this is not for Unreal Engine. They know this is for our game. So now we can just switch this to a shipping build and build it once more. Then we can copy it over to our shipping build. So I'm going to put it into engine, binaries, Win64. Here's the crash report client. And I am going to fetch the new one. And it's simple files here. No, actually, let's not. Just the crash report client. I'm going to copy it there, replace it, and delete the symbol file. So now, if we test it, we get the new crash reporter. If you're using a binary version of the editor, like we're doing in this video, you're going to have to do this step manually, like copying the crash reporter over and also copying the config file that tells it where to send the crashes. So it would be best to make this automated, these steps. So either like make a bat file that does it for you, or if you're using some continuous integration system like Jenkins or TeamCity, to just make it a part of the build. If we're using the source version of the editor, we can just check in the changes that we have to this, and then that can just be a part of the build, and then we don't even have to worry about it. There are a few more things that I wanted to talk about, but we are just out of time, so I'm going to have to summarize them here so you can check them out yourself. So first one is setting up your own symbol server. That allows you to catalog your symbol files so that if you get a mini dump from an older version of the crash, it will just automatically get the correct symbols and it will just work out of the box. Also check out source indexing. Source indexing allows you to have Visual Studio fetch the correct version of the source files in relation to what version that the crash happened. It's just black magic. Also, our asserts, the Unreal asserts, we have a documentation page on it. You can check it out, look it up online. So check, verify, ensure. All of these allow you to either crash or just assert on the game, which also gets sent to your crash reporter. And yeah, those allow you to crash with a very descriptive error message. So you'll find out what's happening like way faster. And lastly, but my absolute favorite feature, is Unreal's data validation plugin. So this allows you to write your own data validation rules for when someone is saving the assets. So in our example, we would have made a data validation rule that whenever someone saves a map, it would go through all the reward spawners and check if the class is set. And if it isn't, it will show an error. So that way now we're getting it fixed at the content creation time and not after it's been shipped. So basically we just eliminate that bug by doing that. And that's it for me. I just want to thank you so much for watching my presentation.